morning and welcome back to our question and answers with our OU kosher rabbinical coordinators. But we've been involved in learning bishul akum and givinas akum and cholov akum and yayin nesech, anything that's related to the topics of food and non-Jews. And many people sent in questions wondering how OU kosher, what their policies are regarding some of these halachas. And no better person to have with us than Rabbi Eli Gersten, who is a rabbinical coordinator, but actually heads the OU's policy and psak in the kosher space. So we're going to jump right in. And the first question is as follows. And just to be makdim, the questions came in. They are assumptions by the ones asking the questions. And Rabbi Gersten will tell us if the assumption is true, not true, and comment and answer the questions and shailos. So the first question that came in was, kosher breads, rolls, and cakes are delivered from the bakeries where they are baked, assuming that they're baked in non-Jewish bakeries, to the shops where they're sold by non-Jewish workers. Or we really could divide the question into two parts. Could be even if they're coming from kosher bakeries, but they're delivered by non-Jewish drivers and in non-Jewish stores, or maybe Jewish stores, but non-Jewish workers. There's a place and space where there are non-Jewish people themselves handling these kosher baked goods. How come they don't need one chosam? That means there's an assumption they don't need one chosam, as we just learned in the Daf, in the Gemara in Avodah Zara, Daf Lamed Tes Lamed Beis. So Rabbi Gersten, is that assumption true? And if it's not true, how does the OU deal with this process?
Okay, so first of all, it is brought in the Gemara, it's brought in Shulchan Aruch, that you do need one chosam for bread. However, the Shach writes that that's true in places where they're makbid on Pas Yisroel. In places where they eat Pas Palter, so then the Shach writes there's no need for a chosam, because even if it would be switched with other bread, the other bread is also mutter. So therefore, then you don't need a chosam. Others disagree. The Pri Chodesh, I believe, disagrees with the Shach and says, well, even in places where they eat Pas Palter, they don't eat Pas Balbayis. So you should always need a chosam, no matter where you are. And others defend the Shach and say, well, either it's like a svek sveka, right? Maybe it wasn't switched, and even if it was switched, maybe it was probably switched with Pas Palter, and therefore it doesn't need a chosam, or because the majority of the bread is going to be Pas Palter, or Pas Palter probably looks different than Pas Balbayis. For different reasons, they're not choshesh for the Pas Balbayis. However, that's all true if the Pas Palter doesn't need hashgacha. That's all talking about a place where it was, like in olden days, it was just simple bread. It was made with flour, water, maybe with eggs. The oil was assumed to be just vegetable oil. Today, there are many ingredients that go into bread. It definitely needs hashgacha. There are places that use grape juice concentrate, for instance, or raisin juice concentrate. These are things that are absolutely, right, learning now, hilchas yayin, absolutely need hashgacha. Even the oils today we have, in the olden days it was assumed, of course, that the oil was, they weren't geyser ala shemen. Shemen was mutter. Today, for various reasons, shemen itself is because of the way it's refined, and it could be made in the same equipment as animal fat. There could be margarines and things that have in them different emulsifiers that are made with animal ingredients. So today, all our breads should have hashgacha. A person should not be buying bread without hashgacha. So if that is the case, in fact, one could argue it needs two chosamas, because it could even be an issa d'oraisa. Okay, or maybe not. Maybe still one chosam, depending on the different reasons of why we have one chosam or two chosamas. So the question then becomes, do we today require chosamas for our breads? And the answer is yes, we do. So one could then ask, well, where is the chosam? So I go into a supermarket, for instance, and I look at my Arnold's bread, and I see that they just have a twist tie at the end, or there's a clip at the end. Is that really a chosam? I mean, anyone could just take it out, substitute it with another bread, and put the twist tie back on at the end. So how does that constitute a chosam? And the answer is that here there's something even better. It's discussed in Shulchan Aruch, something called tfiyas ayin, which is that if you were to look, okay, next time you're in the supermarket, take a look at the Wonder Bread and the Arnold's Bread and the Pepperidge Farm and all the other brands, and you'll see each brand has a unique shape and look to its bread. And even though you might not be so familiar, but you could compare it with all the others. If you had an Arnold's Bread in a Wonder Bread wrapper, it would stand out. It would look different than all the others there. So this is, when you talk about a palter, they make it in a tefus. They make it in a form that each bread that they make is identical to the other breads that they make. And this is even better than a siman. This is referred to as a tvias ayin. There is by looking at it, with just our eyesight alone, we could see, just like when I look at my friend, I don't recognize him based on because of his simonim that he has. It's not his name written on his shirt, or but rather I know him because that's what he looks like. So too, now other packages, let's say cookies and things like, they come in packaging. They come in sealed packaging. Sealed packaging is automatically considered like two chosamos. It is what we refer to as tamper-proof packaging. And Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva about this as well. He says, whenever you have tamper-proof packaging, that is even better than two chosamos. Two chosamos means it takes a large amount of effort in order to be able to cheat, to be able to tamper with it. And if it's something that you can't at all, so that's even better than two chosamos. So most of the OU foods are sold that way. They're sold in sealed packaging where you'd have to rip it. There's no way to close it back up again once you open it. The one exception is bread. And like we explained, the bread also, because it comes from a bakery, they all have a unique shape. That is considered a tvias ayin. That's even better also than two chosamos. And that is, but now if you have, let's say you have your yeshiva and they get a delivery, right? It comes a delivery from the local bakery, a box of bread. There's nothing unique about it. It's just, comes, there's no sign, that could in fact be a problem. Rebelsky Zatzal used to tell over a story about how there was a bakery who got his bread every day from there was a yeshiva. They got their bread every day from a local bakery. And one day they noticed there was something a little bit different about the bread. So they called up the baker. And they called the bakery and said, they would just send a box unsealed, just had in it, a few loaves of bread and maybe some pastries, whatever they had for the yeshiva. And the baker he said, well, actually, we had an emergency. There was a flood last night, and I called another bakery to deliver it. Now, okay, Baruch Hashem, it was also a kosher bakery. But the point is, you never know. When things come open, unsealed, if you are a yeshiva and you are getting from a local bakery, you should ask them to seal it. You should ask them to put tape around it, some sort of a chosam on it, that at least one chasima, which would be the ikar adin, to know that your bread is coming from where it's supposed to be coming from.
So you would say similarly, you see many stores get deliveries, the sort of open boxes of danishes and donuts and all these types of things. L'chatchila, these things
Right.
should have a tape around them.
And yes, absolutely. Unless there is something unique about the shape or the look. Maybe your local bakery makes it a certain way. They make their donuts with the sprinkles on one side. If there's the way of indicating that it came from there, then fine. But otherwise, let's say Oreo cookies. I think they have stamped with the word Oreo on the cookie. Right? You don't have to be concerned that somebody else is substituting a different cookie so long as it says Oreo on it.
Right. Okay. Thank you on that. Next question is, why is a cup of coffee made by a non-Jew not considered bishul akum? Again, this is an assumption from the questioner. The coffee cannot be eaten raw, and it is oil al shulchan malachim.
Okay, so one of the first to discuss this question is the Pri Chadash. I guess in his day, in the 1600s, that's when coffee started becoming very prevalent. They had other forms of coffee beforehand too. There were chicory and different other grains that they would use to make different types of coffee. Anyway, it's absolutely correct. It is oil shulchan malachim. It's considered not nechal chai. And the Pri Chadash, it gives the answer. He says, well, it's ikroi mayim, which is really Taisus gives this answer for beer. Taisus says that why is it that beer is not nechal chai? Taisus says maybe beer is not oil shulchan malachim. That's one of the tourists. But Taisus gives another answer. He says it's ikroi mayim. It's the bracha is shahakol, right? It's not mezonos. Why is it shahakol? Because it's mostly water. And water is something which is nechal chai, and therefore and we have a rule, when you have a mixture of different foods, some are nechal chai, and some are, this is the Gemara mentions this case. The Gemara has a case of kasa daharsana. Gemara says over there, you go after the ikar. It's a mixture of things which are edible raw, which was the the fish juice, in that case, the fish oil, because it was salted, the tzir that came from the fish was considered nechal chai, and it had in it flour, which requires cooking. People can't eat raw flour. So you make this paste, this dip called kosher taharsana, and the Gemara says it does require bishul Yisroel. Why? The Gemara says mo the same karsana ikar. You might think that this fish juice, which was nechal chai, maybe that's the ikar. Kamashmalan kimcha ikar. No, we go after the ikar. The ikar here is the flour. Okay, but when it comes to the beer or it comes to coffee, the water is the ikar. Even though obviously the person wants the coffee very much, but it's mostly a drink, and 95%, 98% of the drink is water, and therefore it is not subject to bishul akum. There are other answers given as well, other explanations. Another possibility is because in order to make coffee, first you roast the beans. Okay, after you roast the beans, already at that point, the coffee beans are considered edible. People eat raw, I wouldn't call it raw, but roasted coffee beans. In fact, there's a question regarding Shabbos, about bishul on Shabbos, for this very reason. Rabbi Yosef has a long tshuva about this. Could you person make coffee on Shabbos? He says that because it's already been roasted, it is only a shaila of bishul acher afia, acher tzli. Okay, therefore there's more room to be makel on that shaila. Again, but that depends on whether you consider the roasted beans to be edible. If you do, and he brings many achronim who say that roasted coffee beans are considered edible at that point, and therefore it would no longer be a shiloh of bishul akum. It's already when you're brewing it, it's already edible at that point.
So in summary, it's correct that cup of coffee could be made lechatchila by a non-Jew.
Correct. If a person wants to have some sort of a chumrah, a hiddur, there are poskim will talk about even, not wanting to rely on any case, even by water, to be machmer. But yes, the halacha is that it is mutter. A person can have a coffee made by a non-Jew. When it comes to bishul akum, we know that there are lots of levels of chumrah. They're not halacha, but a person wants to be mahader, so.
Okay, so we move on to a couple of questions that are relevant in people's homes when there are non-Jews in the home. So the first question is regarding yayin nesech. Someone left an open bottle of non-mavulshal wine in his house with a non-Jewish cleaning lady around, and he informed her that he is leaving. And when he returns, he is sure that quantity of wine in the bottle is the same. Could there be any issue with drinking the wine? Could one do this lechatchila? What if you're unsure if the quantity is the same? So in summary, the question is, what's the best way for a person to deal with non-mavushal wines in his home with non-Jewish people around? And if he didn't do what he is supposed to do lechatchila, what could he do afterwards in two situations? One is where he knows and him looks exactly the same, and where maybe he's unsure if the quantity is the same.
Okay, so first of all, lechatchila, a person shouldn't be leaving their wine in this type of a situation. So we know from the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch that there is a heter called yaitsev nechnas. As long as there's a mirsus, there's a fear that you leave with the non-Jew, that they shouldn't touch anything in the house, you're going to be coming in and going. Now, even if you're going out for a while, like the person, in this case, let's say, is driving a carpool, or they're going to the store, they should tell the whoever it is that they're leaving alone in the house, whether a worker, a babysitter, whether it's a cleaning lady, you should tell the person, I'm going out and I won't be back for an hour. Okay, there's no need to do that. What you should say is, I'm going out, I'll be right back. Okay, if you need me, here's my phone number, but I'll be right back. I might be back in 2 minutes, I might be back in half an hour. You don't have to tell them when you'll be back. You say, I'll be right back soon. I'll be back soon. Like this, they never know when you're coming. That's called a yaitsev nechnas, and that leaves the mirsus. So just to deal with the question, the person, they could have avoided all the issues if they would have used the correct, wording to begin with. Don't tell somebody that, I won't be back for an hour. You have free reign of this house for the next hour. That is never a good idea. Now, in terms of if the person did, let's say for whatever reason they did say, I have to run out, do a carpool, I won't be back for an hour. Oh, whoops, I already said it. Okay, I left. Now there's wine in the fridge. So a few things. First of all, does the non-Jew know that the wine is in the fridge? Do they have any reason to be going into it? Let's say it's a worker in the house. You left somebody who's fixing your air conditioner. Okay, so we don't have to be choshesh We don't have to assume that they even know about the wine in the fridge. If they have no reason to go there, so it could be in a closet, it could be anywhere, it could be in the fridge. If there's no reason to assume that they even know about the fact that there's an open bottle, then it only becomes a problem once they know about it. If I give it to them, the cases in Shulchan Aruch are, I make them a shomer on it, or I give it to them as a shliach. They know about it. Okay, so but if in a case where they don't know about it, so that's a suffix whether they even know about the wine to begin with. So then we have a suffix d'Rabbanan lahakil in that case. If they're a cleaning lady, though, and she's supposed to be cleaning the kitchen, and that's part of her job is to clean the refrigerator or to be putting things into the refrigerator, so then obviously you have to assume that she knows about it. But let's say she's supposed to be vacuuming, she's supposed to be dusting, she's supposed to be in the living room. You tell her, you have no reason to go into the kitchen. That's not what she's expected. She's doing laundry, she's doing bedding, things like that. So then again, then it is okay. The fact that there's an open bottle in the refrigerator, you can assume that she doesn't even know about it. There's no reason for her to have opened the fridge. Now, let's say she does know about it and you told her that you're not going to be home. Now, the fact that you know the level of wine is not really adequate, because if one of the concerns is, let's say she were to take a cup of wine. Okay, she's thirsty. She says, "Ooh, a fancy wine. Let me say, I never haven't tasted this type of wine in a long time." Now, she knows she's not supposed to be taking the wine. Okay, she's a cleaning lady. She's not being given, access to everything in the house. She's not supposed to be taking, but she wants to do it, and she knows no one's going to catch her. No one's coming home for an hour. So what is she going to do? Okay, she'll take a little bit of wine and she'll refill it. So she'll put some water back in to make up the level. Now, how do you know that she didn't take out a 1 ounce of wine from the cup, from the bottle, and substitute it with a little bit of water? Since you can't know that, the wine indeed would be problematic. So, if you're going to leave, you could seal the bottle. If you realize you left the bottle in the fridge, you could put a chosam on it. You could take the bottle and hide it, like we said before. You don't have to leave it in the fridge in a place where she has access. You could put it at the top of a different cabinet where she doesn't go. Anything like that would take care of the problem. Now, I should just mention, this is not only an issue with wine. Moshe Feinstein has a tshuva about leaving a babysitter, a non-Jewish babysitter, alone with your kids. And what's with all the kalim in the house, the utensils, right? Maybe she cooked something dairy in a fleshik pot. Maybe she cooked something meat in a milchik pot. Maybe she cooked basmachal. Who knows what she did in the house? If you leave somebody alone in your house with access to all your kalim, you don't know what took place when you aren't there. And if there's no mirsas, another eitzah people have for babysitters is to have cameras in their kitchen, which is a good idea anyways, right? So have a video camera in the house. Have someone drop by. That's what Moshe says. If you have a babysitter, you should have a neighbor. You should tell the lady there's going to be a neighbor that's going to be coming by sometime during the day. So like this, it doesn't have to be every 5 minutes, right? She doesn't have to come back even every hour. But as long as she knows any time during the day someone might come in, she's not going to cook if she's not supposed to be cooking, because she'll say, it's hard to hide that you've been cooking if someone walks in right then, has the key and walks right into the kitchen, sees that you've been cooking in the kitchen.
So just to follow up on that point, does a cleaning lady have to know that she can cook with, in other words, let's say she knows part of her job is generally cooking when it's done properly, let's say when someone else turns on the fire. If she doesn't know specifically, I can't turn on the fire, does a Yetziv and Nichnas help without video cameras?
Right, so absolutely. You have to give her clear instructions to begin with. If the lady doesn't know that there's anything wrong with what she's doing, then there's no mirsas. The whole idea of mirsas is that, but let's say the case before, taking wine. Everybody knows they shouldn't be taking food, right? She might not know that she doesn't have a right to heat up her food in your microwave. She might think, I go to other people's houses. Everybody gives me permission to use the microwave to heat up my sandwich, right? Why would I think that there's anything wrong with that? But let's say taking wine, that she knows, it's understood. You don't have permission to drink someone else's wine, but she might take some anyway and replace it with water. So just relying on the level is not really adequate.
They actually make, I don't have it here with me, but I have it in my home. There was someone in Lakewood, he created with these 3D printers, these seals that is lockable caps that go on top of bottles. They're designed exactly to fit on top of the bottle, and they have a little lock on it, and it's a cute gadget that I use in my house to which keeps your mind clear of any shailos. Okay, following up on both things that you mentioned. So let's just stay with the yayin nesech for a second. Somebody asked that I had my non-religious grandmother over for the Purim Suda, and there was an open bottle of non-mavashal wine, which she passed to another person. Is that a problem of yayin nesech?
Okay, so just passing a bottle by itself does not make yayin nesech. The yayin nesech is when you pour the wine. Even though we are machmer, most poskim hold that the rules of yayin nesech or stam yayinim, I should call it, apply to a non-religious someone who's not a shayber Shabbos as well. However, even that there are poskim who are more makel in that regard, because they are not of the Avodah Zara. So even if they have the dinoi, like we say, tuna akum, tuna mummer, but it's not the same. It would have perhaps the status like a Yishmaeli, somebody who a Yishmaeli has the status that they are not of the Avodah Zara, but they're not Jewish, which is a middle ground. And Shulchan Aruch differentiates between the different types of non-Jews. There are those who actual pagans, those who would pour wine for Avodah Zara, and then there are those who they're not Jewish, but they so there's the isser of chasnos, but they're not oivdei Avodah Zara. So where exactly does the non-Shomer Shabbos fit? It would seem more with those who are not oivdei Avodah Zara, but we give them the status of because they're not Shomer Shabbos, they get the status of a non-Jew. So in this regard, it is more kal. And therefore, but anyway, either way, the moving of the bottle itself, as long as they did not pour it, it does not make it usher. Also, there's something called shechshach, which means to shake the bottle. That also can make it usher. But if they didn't do either of those, they just passed it from, even if it's an open bottle. Now, if the cork is in the bottle, people make this mistake all the time. If the cork is in the bottle or the cap is on the bottle, that's called a closed bottle, even though it's not sealed. So regarding what we were discussing before, in the fridge, it's considered open in terms of hachlafa or drinking from it. But in terms of them moving it, or even if they were to shake it, we say ein derech shechshach bekach. It's not considered shechshach. It's certainly not called pouring if the bottle has the cap or cork in it. So as long as you kept the cork in it, which is usually the case, most people when they have a bottle on the table, the cap or the cork is on it, and therefore that certainly would be, even if there was a non-Jew at the table who passed it, even if they shook it, the wine would still be absolutely mutter.
But it's certainly l'chatchila in halacha not to have non-mavashal wines on the table with non-religious people.
Correct. It's always best to, especially, let's say everybody goes into the kitchen, leaves the person unattended with the bottle of wine. Now you don't know. Maybe they did pour, maybe they didn't. You didn't check the level. Here, you're not concerned about water being added, like we said before, but maybe they poured themselves a little bit. You don't know what happened. So it's best not to serve non-mavashal wine if there are people there who are not Shomer Shabbos.
Okay, just to get back, you started mentioning about people who have non-Jewish help in the home. So let's just ask the question, and round out this question. So the person sent in, obviously, what he wants to know. What are the recommendations would you give regarding families who have cooking done for children by a nanny or a babysitter who is not Jewish, often in homes with small children and two working parents? There's no one else available to cook dinner for the kids or even to aid in the cooking process. For example, can the view in the Rishonim that bishul akum does not apply in the home of a Jew ever be relied upon? So you mentioned video cameras. Obviously, I should say we don't have to mention. We do have to mention. You certainly cannot l'chatchila ask your non-Jewish help to turn the fire on and do the cooking. I would think maybe there is a place to be makel, but I would think not. And so, how would you advise somebody who's in this situation? What's the best way they can be kind to halacha and try to run a kosher home?
Right. So you're right. Even video cameras won't help you in this case because video cameras don't help for bishul akum. The yid has to turn on the fire. So the easiest, the best aids in this case is to have to prepare foods ahead of time that are cooked foods that all they need is reheating. Bishul akum only applies if it's raw food. if it's if you, let's say, even make a soup ahead of time. They just have to put it back on the stove and reheat it for the child. You make noodles, you pre-cook them. They just want to heat it up, melt cheese on it. You come up with a list of meals that they could serve the child that are not going to involve bishul akum. If you're going to tell the kid, if the kid wants a scrambled egg, that's going to be a problem. They want to, but if they want a hard-boiled egg, well, you could hard-boil them in advance and keep some hard-boiled eggs in the fridge, and the kid, you could just warm it up for them. So it's being prepared, basically. There's a lot of foods, that you can serve that are just, leftovers, that type of thing, where it's already all been pre-cooked, and you're just reheating the food. That takes care of the problem of bishul akum. If you need a fire to be turned on, then there should be some sort of a system in place where a neighbor comes over and turns on the fire for them. Of course, you have to have your video cameras to know that it was the neighbor who turned on the fire, things like that. Now, that was mentioned, there is a shita brought. It's the nesech do talk about shitas Rabbeinu Avram, which is that bebeso she Yisroel, there's no bishul akum. So we do not paskin like that shita of Rabbeinu Avram. However, it is used b'tziruf, as a tziruf. So, for instance, though in the older days, people had pilot lights in their house. Very few houses today have pilot lights anymore. Most of the stovetops are made with the electronic ignition. They just don't make them with pilot lights anymore. So, but if a person is lucky enough to have a pilot light in his house, then that's where people rely on pilot lights together with that shita of Rabbeinu Avram of Beisach Yisrael. The Taz brings that but tziruf of that, those two svaras, then there's room to be makel. And even that, he only says to rely on b'diavad or b'shas adchak. So if a person, let's say a person has, has an elderly, and there's an aide, and let's say an elderly parent, and there's an aide in the house, a non-Jewish aide who's taking care of them, who's cooking for them, and they need, they can't have leftovers. They need fresh chicken and, chicken soup and all the different things. That's where people would rely on, to shas adchak. They would rely on this heter of the beisach Yisrael, with the eish me'esh, that the heter of pilot lights. But otherwise, it's not relied on by itself. So you have to come up with another eitzah. The child could eat toast. That's not a problem. They could eat again, like you mentioned, for noodles if you cook them. Lots of things are not olah shulchan balachim. So oatmeal, for instance, is not olah shulchan balachim. So a child wants a hot cereal. That's not a problem. Okay, so you should ask. Really, a person should speak to someone that they trust, a rav or the rabbi, and go through the different foods with them that they would have them prepare, and see each case whether it's an issue or not.
So you mentioned pilot light, which makes it sound like that lighting eish me'esh is a problem. Is if the stove is turned on to the lowest flame and the non-Jew makes it higher to cook, is that a problem as well?
Nope, that's fine. That's not just eish me'esh. That's, I already have a fire and I'm increasing the fire, adding more fuel to the fire. That's okay. Eish me'esh is where I take a candle from elsewhere and I light the fire over here, which is really what happens with a pilot light. Now, Ramosha, I believe, has I've seen it quoted, I don't know if it's in the Ikris Moshe or not, but there's a psak they have from Ramosha, that if you have a pilot light, which is right next to the flame, I think in most houses it wasn't that way. Usually the pilot light was like underneath the stove in an inaccessible area that lights, it goes through the gas through a tube. But sometimes in commercial kitchens you have like that, where the pilot light is actually part of the flame itself. Then you have this svara that I'm not just taking a flame from elsewhere, but I'm actually increasing the flame that's already existing. That's better. Moshe said that's better than eish me'esh, and then that perhaps can be relied on. But in general, we don't rely, at least lechatchila, on eish me'esh alone, but it's used b'diavad. You call up the rav, again, it's not so common these days, but if it would happen, the cleaning lady or whatever, the babysitter cooked without anyone turning it on, okay, b'diavad, we rely on eish me'esh.
So this really leads right into the next question. Somebody asked, does the OU rely on stove pilots in restaurants, or they require a mashgiach to light the burner on foods that require bishul Yisroel?
Yes. So the policy in OU restaurants and caterers is that we have to have the mashgiach light all the fires. There's a mashgiach tamidi. That's his job. In the morning, he'll light it. Now they don't necessarily leave it on high the whole day. They might do, like you said, they might turn it lower, higher. The non-Jew might adjust it, especially if they're frying or cooking. They don't always need the temperature so high. But if it's turned off for whatever reason, the mashgiach must relight it. Oftentimes, though, in restaurants, they do have pilot lights, and that's used as a backup. So in case something were to happen, the non-Jew has to go out for a while. The mashgiach has to go out for a while. He can't know 100%. In case a fire went out. So as a backup, in case a fire did go out, or let's say it becomes known that it went out, so then b'diavad, the food is, we do rely on the heter of Eish Me'esh. The Ramah does quote it, Eish Me'esh, and the Ramah quotes it as, it's actually brought from the Isser Heter as a b'diavad. That's how the Ramah intended it. It's not meant as a l'chatchila, and that's how the OU relies on it as well.
Okay, so discussing eggs. So somebody asks, well, somebody asked, at a non-kosher hotel with complimentary breakfast, is there anything one may eat or drink? I'm assuming they didn't come here to find out that they could eat the fruits and the closed cereal. Or maybe Rabbi Gersten has something that may be hot. Or maybe, the next question is, at a hotel breakfast, there's an appliance for patrons to boil eggs. Can I use it to boil an egg for myself?
Okay, so regarding the boiling egg, it's not, even though you're putting the egg in to the hot water, so that's bishul Yisroel. Even for Sfardim, right? We know there's a difference for Ashkenazim and Sfardim. For Ashkenazim, it's enough to just turn on the fire. For Sfardim, they have to actually put the food on the fire. They have to actually cook the food. It's not just enough to turn on the fire. Here, putting the egg into the boiling water is cooking it. So for everybody, that would be bishul Yisrael. But there is still a problem because Mechaber says that if you have kalim that were used for bishul akum, they have to be kashered before they're used. So this kli, this utensil, obviously is not being kashered. It's being used every single day. They're non-Jews putting their eggs in there, making it, that would make it bishul akum. So, you have to tell them, hold it, I have to take this away. I have to dump it into boiling water. I have to bring it back. So then, that's not so practical. Therefore, a person should not use it. Now, in terms of what can you eat at the hotel? So, of course, anything in a sealed container, if it has OU or a reputable hashgach on it, obviously that's fine. Even they often will put out cereal in a receptacle. There's no, but you could ask them to see the bag. Say, I see you have something that looks like Cheerios. Can I just see the bag? Make sure it comes from General Mills. I see that there's Rice Krispies. Let me see that it's Kellogg's. So then if they show you the bag and it shows you Kellogg's Krispies, then yes, then that is obviously that's fine as well. If there's fruit that they put out, even cut fruit, one could eat that because since they cut so much fruit, they put out large platters of fruit. We assume that they have dedicated knives, and if it wouldn't be a dedicated knife, it says in Shulchan Aruch that once you cut so much fruit, we assume that it'll be bottle, whatever little ticha of shamnunis that's on the knife in all the different fruit that are cut. So those are the main things. Other than that, if they, let's say they have bagels or pastries, and they tell you, oh, it comes from such and such a bagel store, this gets into what we discussed at the very beginning. No, without a chosam, you can't rely that it came from that bagel store. It sounds like a nice idea. It came from, bagel, Brooklyn Bagel, whatever it is, and you happen to know that that's a place that has a hashgacha. It lost it because since it doesn't have the chosam anymore, you can't rely on that anymore.
Excellent. Okay. So this is more of a general question. People don't have clarity in this. I'll ask them really two questions together. What exactly constitutes pas akum? And the next question was, is there any reason why I cannot eat Stella Dora cookies? And how about Cheerios?
Okay, so we know that there's different levels. Shulchan Aruch describes 3 different levels of pas. There's pas Yisrael, of course, which means that a Jew is involved somehow in the baking. Even if he throws in hashlachas kisim, he throws in a twig into the fire, that's enough, even for Sfardim, for everybody, that's enough to make it pas Yisrael. And then there's what we call pas palter. So the Stella Dora cookies would fall into that category. There's no Jew involved in the baking per se, but it's done commercially. It's done for sale. So then that's called pas palter. And there, Sfardim, the Mechaber is machmer. He says that unless there's no pas Yisrael available, or unless the pas palter is much better. So maybe each person has to make their own determination. In the case of the Stellador cookies, are they considered much better than the alternative? That there's nothing equivalent available. But if there's something equivalent available, then a Sephardi should not be buying pas palter. He should buy the pas Yisrael. For Ashkenazim, the Rama says that we hold that we paskin that pas palter is mutter. However, it's considered a chumrah, a hiddur, to buy pas Yisrael. The Shach brings that, it says that person should try l'chachila to have this hiddur. By Klal Yisrael, there's a minig dergeserisi mechuva that everybody has this minig of eating only pas Yisrael. Mishabura brings as well that on Shabbos and Yontiv, a person should have. It's again a hiddur. It's not the same level even as a sarsi mechuva, but it's a nice idea that people should only eat pas Yisrael. So, a person wants to serve Oreo cookies, that's for the Friday night meal after the Suda. So again, it's mutter, but it's not lechatchil. It's not muhudr. The hiddur is to have, pas Yisrael on Shabbos. In terms of Cheerios, so that's even a further level down. Cheerios are boiled first before they're baked. There are shitas that say that if you boil pas and then you bake it, that's not considered to be pas, and therefore it would not be included in the in the category of pas palter. Even it would be considered in the category of bishul. Okay, so it would have to be bishul Yisrael. It's not bishul Yisrael either, so maybe it should be bishul akum. But we don't consider it to be oilo shochem malachim. Okay, you don't go to a dinner, a fancy dinner, or a wedding, or anybody, and they serve you a bowl of Cheerios. So we consider that not to be. Even though there are those that say that the definition of oilo shochem malachim is what the king would eat even for breakfast. And if you went to Buckingham Palace or something, maybe they eat Cheerios for breakfast. I don't know. So there are those who are machmer like that. But the general Rebelsky held the general minig in Klal Yisrael is that that bishul akum is determined by what you would serve, like the Rambam writes, what you would serve a guest, that you would be mazmin chaverai. Rambam writes, ein adam mazmin chaverai ala kloyos. Person doesn't invite his friend over to eat toasted grains, okay, which we call Cheerios, right, Toasted O's, or Rice Krispies, or any of these type of cereals, cornflakes. These are not things that you are an oil or shach blachim, and therefore they're not a problem. Now, back to the question. So then there's a category of pas balabayis, which means my neighbor invites me over, and I watched him bake the bread, and I know he did everything exactly. No non-kosher ingredients. Everything was done proper. It was done in a brand new oven. Even still, you cannot eat the bread. That's called pas balabayis, since it's not made for sale. And that, even the Rama says that the minig is not to eat. So we don't eat any pas balabayis. But that's not so common. So again, Cheerios, because it's boiled first, and there's other reasons because of the small size and the way it's puffed and the way it's made. There are those that say it doesn't have tzuras hapas to it. So different reasons why it's not considered perhaps to be pas. This question of Cheerios comes up in many different ways. It's asked regarding if a person's kaveh suda. Is that considered? Does he have to bench at the end? So for that, Rebelsky said that maybe a person should be machmer. It's good not to eat 4 bowls of Cheerios and get into the shailos of kaveh suda. But in terms of whether it's considered pas regarding a serisimei tshuva, Rebelsky held that there's no need to be machmer for that. For this minig, we could assume that all the other reasons that we just mentioned why it's not considered pas are more than enough to rely on. So a person wants to eat Cheerios on Shabbos, absolutely they could. If a person wants to eat Stellador cookies on Shabbos, better not to, but if they want to, they can. To eat it during a serisimei tshuva, they really should not. But best to eat pas Yisrael whenever you can. That's the hiddur.
So I guess the last thing you just mentioned regarding hiddur or halacha, someone's convinced that Stellador cookies don't exist in any other flavor, shape, or form, etc. Is there still a hiddur in general and to be makbid on not eating Stellador cookies, and I guess especially during a serisimei tshuva?
I guess you call it a chumrah, a hiddur, but it would be mutter all the time, because even if there's no equivalence to it, that even during a serisimei tshuva, if a person doesn't have pas Yisrael available, he's allowed to eat pas palter. That said, it's brought down that people would go to great lengths to have Pas Yisrael, especially during a Sefer Tshuva or Shabbos. People would go to great lengths to do so. So even though a person could just pater himself very easily and say it's not available, it's that's not the right thing to do.
Okay, so let's wrap it up. Thank you very much again for your time. Wrap it up with these two questions, which, as they say in the yeshivish parlance, Kvardashu Be'Rabim. Ramosha has a tshuva regarding potato chips that require bishul Yisroel. At least that's what it says in the tshuva. So number one, why is the OU not makbid on this? And number two, again, regarding bishul akum, what's the OU stance and what is the process with Pringles? Since they're first made into mashed potatoes, do they require bishul Yisroel?
Okay, so Rebelsky Zatzal has a tshuva about potato chips, and he says, like we mentioned before, they're not ola shulchan malachim. You don't go to a chasna and get served a bowl of potato chips. You get served potatoes, roasted potatoes. You get served rice, chicken, obviously, but not potato chips. And even though today, I think I've been to weddings where they will stick a single potato chip into the mashed potatoes, to give it some color or some fancy. So that doesn't make something ola shulchan malachim. The fact that you could stick a single potato chip onto a plate, you could put anything. Belsky writes that in the tshuva too. Anything could be put on, served al shulchan malachim in some form. Just give the example before, cornflakes, right? So cornflakes, I think we all agree, are not ola shulchan malachim. But yet, of course, you go to a wedding and they'll serve chicken, southern fried chicken with cornflakes as a breading. So that's used as a tuffle. So when something says a tuffle, that's not called oila shulchan malachim. It needs to be the ikr. So potatoes are an ikr. They're served as a course. They're served as a dish. That potato chip is called a tuffle. It's just served as something to enhance the other food, and therefore that's not significant. It is true there is a tshuva for Moshe, and he talks about something called potato chips. Rebelsky brings that in the tshuva, and he says that he spoke to the tshuva was actually to Reuven, to Moshe's son, and he asked Reuven, how could it be that potato chips are oila shulchan malachim? What exactly was Moshe referring to? Perhaps Moshe was referring to French fries. In Eretz Yisrael, they refer to French fries as chips. In America, we call it chips, but so the term chips is maybe or maybe he's referring to some very fancy form of potato chips. They have these, sweet potato chips or something like that, which are a little fancier. But he thought maybe he's talking about some sort of a fancy, fried potato, which would be ola shulchan malachim. That's what Rebelsky concluded. Reuven said he wasn't exactly sure, even though he asked it, whatever. It wasn't sure how Moshe understood the question. Obviously, Reuven, I think, understood it to mean potato chips, but he wasn't sure how Moshe interpreted the question. So it was never, Anyway, Rebelsky says, regardless of that, he says, Maisa, we don't paskin that these type of things are ola shulchan malachim, and therefore the potato chips are all, that's our, again, we mentioned before, there are those who would say it's what the king would eat. King eats potato chips. These are fancy potato chips, let's say. The king would eat them for a snack. There are those that interpret it that way, and therefore cornflakes. I think the Chazon Ish held that way. It could be Moshe was machber like that Chazon Ish. I don't know. But even if he was, the minig is not that way. The minig is that the cornflakes, the Rice Krispies, the potato chips are all not called oila shulchan malachim. And it's possible that Moshe wasn't even referring to our potato chips. He was referring to something more like a French fry. Now, in terms of Pringles, that's a different issue altogether. Pringles are made from potato flour. Potato flour is made from cooking potatoes, okay, which should be bishul akum, because once a cooked potato, everybody agrees a boiled potato is bishul akum. The issue with Pringles is that the potatoes are not boiled in water; they are initially cooked with steam. So this is another category of. We didn't talk about the different ways of cooking things, but there's in Shulchan Aruch it says ishun is not bishul akum. If a person cooks with smoke, that Poskim understand even means hot smoke. You hot smoke your fish or things like that, meat. That's not bishul akum. What about with steam? So there are those who compare. They call it kitur. That's the Poskim referred to as kitur. Kitur, many Poskim hold is the same as ishun. Okay, Rav Yosef has a tshuva about it. He's Mekel. The Minchas Yitzchak has a tshuva about kitur, and he says if it's done in a factory, then you can be Mekel this tziruf of kitur together with factories. Ramosha actually in that tshuva about potato chips, the one that you just mentioned, he says many are makel in factories. He's referring to the same svara that the Minchas Yitzchak was referring to, which is a tshuva from the Maritz alone, who's makel in, it's done with a palter for bishul palter. And Ramosha says that many are makel, and he says you don't have to be meicha. So even the thing which Ramosha considered to be olo shulchan malachim, Ramosha says there is a tzad to be makel. So here now we're discussing we have two tzadim to be makel. There's the heter of kitur together with the heter of factories. So that the OU relies on is if it's done in an unconventional way, meaning a way that you would not cook in your normal kitchen. It's done with steaming, direct steam injection. These are fancy types of cooking methods, and that's how they prepare the instant potatoes. Those potatoes are then used to make the Pringles. So then they reconstitute it and they reshape it, and they then fry the potatoes, and that becomes bishul. So it's not bishul akum anymore because the potatoes are already cooked. And since the OU accepts that those dehydrated potatoes, which are made through steam in a factory, are permitted, therefore the Pringles itself are permitted. There are those who want to be machmer on this heter of kitur, and then that's why you hear that some people, only buy the Hamisha brands of Pringles, whatever those names are, because they will have bishul Yisroel dehydrated potatoes. But if you buy the regular Pringles, the OU certifies them. They're also permitted. It's based on this Minchas Yitzchak that this is siruf of kitur together with factories.
So what you're saying is that even if somebody is machmir, mahadir, that are potato chips, they want to only have bishul Yisroel, it's a whole different discussion regarding Pringles. There, the discussion is whether or not steaming is something that requires
correct. If anything,
bishul Yisroel.
Right, correct. If anything, perhaps there's probably more room to be machmer on the Pringles than there is on the regular potato chips. So, but either way, it is mutter. And the rule in bishul akum is, like it says in Shulchan Aruch, that suffik bishul akum is lakula. Whenever there's a machlokes, not every case, but in general, when there's a machlokes that has no hachra, that there's no way to the poskim don't you see many poskim on both sides, and we don't have a clear way of how to answer it. So then we assume that we go lakula. That's the psak in Shulchan Aruch. So here too, when it comes to steaming, there are many that are machmer, and many are mekel. And here we have another tziruf also of factories. And anyway, we follow this hachra of Rabbi Yosef and the Minchas Yitzchak, and that when you have this tziruf of poskim and bekulas, that we're mekel.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much, Rabbi Gersten. We're going to look forward to perhaps having another discussion when we're learning Masechtas Chulin, one of the sugyas of bittul and all the other interesting sugyas that are very relevant to OU kosher.
Okay, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.